Welcome to everyone. We're so grateful to have Erin here again. Erin is our clinical director for our Seeking Integrity residential treatment program. She oversees much more than that. She also is one of the facilitators for our Empowered Women's Retreat, which the information has been posted. It's on the Seeking Integrity site. We are super excited to offer that again August 15th through 18th. And we're always happy to answer questions about things here, or you can email me, Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. But we've got a question, and I'm sure more will roll in. So, Erin, we're going to start with the first one, which is, oh, D-Day was 10 months ago. How long does porn-induced erectile dysfunction last if the man is being abstinent? That's a great question. And there's so many aspects and factors. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to give time frames because there's so many layers to this. I mean, I don't know, is there mental health issues? Is there substance use involved? What was the length or longevity that they were watching, pornography for how many hours a day? I mean, so it kind of, because it hijacks the arousal template. And ultimately that intensity seeking, right, makes it really difficult to get an erection when you're in a non-intense situation and you're trying to be intimate emotionally. So honestly, I've seen porn-induced erectile dysfunction go away in a matter of 90 days. I've seen it take longer than a year. I've seen it take longer than that. And really it's about, for me, what we want to look at is the person not just engaging in recovery so that they have new neural pathways, but engaging in learning how to create emotional intimacy that's connected to sex. Because if someone is still super engaged in fantasy all the time, they're continually, like, those neural pathways that you're trying to cut off, even though you're not necessarily watching pornography, those neural pathways are still being grooved every time you're going back to fantasy and living that fantasy out. And so this is a tough question to answer in terms of definitive timeframes. I always say, like, give it a year, right, of good recovery and good work on both parts. But it's hard to say because, again, there are a lot of factors and a lot of layers here.
Well, and this question says, since being abstinent. So abstinent is different than all of those things that Erin was talking about. That's real recovery work. The other thing, if you mentioned it, I apologize, but if you haven't had a medical evaluation, always good to make sure that there's not something physically like going on as well, as part of this. And this is a time to be upfront with your doctor. Say the truth. Your doctor will be, unable to truly diagnose if they don't know what's going on. So this is, a safe place. Tell the truth so that you get the help that you need. So
I think too, sometimes people go the complete opposite pendulum swing. Like, our goal is not abstinence forever, right? Our goal is to reintegrate healthy sexuality and what that looks like. And we sometimes see people go to kind of the sexual anorexic side. Like, they're so scared of any of their own sexual desire or impulses that they just shut that off altogether. And it's one of those things where you may want to reintroduce sex on a slower, more graded task assignment, like Sense It Focus with Masters and Johnson is a great way to do that. But because now there's almost sometimes like a performance fear around sex. Once you've experienced porn-induced erectile dysfunction, now the fear is, oh my gosh, I'm entering into this sexual situation. I want to perform. I don't want her to take it personally. I don't want this to go bad. And that anxiety itself can kind of perpetuate the ED. So it's just something that the vast many layers that are involved here. But yeah, medical is a good point, Tammy. Definitely want to get that checked out, especially if it's gone on for over a year. And then you want to look at, is there a way that we can, in a lower stakes environment, kind of reintroduce sexual activity based on just being close to one another physically and emotionally, and communicating what we're feeling and moving to that place over time versus, let's see if this works now, because there's a lot of pressure in that. And there's also a lot of fear when you don't trust your sexual impulses anymore because they've essentially destroyed your life. You want to be able to enter that water slowly and feel safe in doing so.
Okay, thanks, Erin. All right, the next question. It's been 4.5 years since D-Day. Both my husband and I are in recovery. My porn addict husband doing those 4.5 years, never told me in a triggering situation that he's triggered or removed himself. He did the opposite, creating stories and lied. I did tell him multiple times how it's important for me to feel safe. When he does that, I feel the opposite. Because of denial and lack of safety, I feel like I've been gaslighted through all this time. He's claiming to be sober since D-Day.
So it sounds like there's no confirmation, right?
Oh, wait. Sorry. I think the next one is connected. It's hard to believe when he cannot even admit to that. Am I asking too much, or should I not ask him if he is doing things or if he is triggered? So I think those two are tied together. So
I think so
sorry.
too. Okay. So one of the things I was saying to the guys this past week is if you can show honesty through lower stakes situations, like you know what? I said I went to the gym this morning and I didn't, right? That it doesn't have to be these huge bombs like that are because many of these guys learn to lie in childhood to protect themselves, right? To say the right answer, to avoid conflict, to avoid whatever the consequences were at that time. And so it's almost like sometimes lying comes before they're even breathing and they don't even think. And so I tell them, out yourself, use that 24-hour grace period, right? Of if you did anything, like that's the place to build trust, is to start to talk about the small things. You know what? I told you that I went to Taco Bell and I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I don't know why I did that, but I want to be honest with you. Those are the things that start to build trust. So I think that in your situation, what you're saying is that exact thing. If he can't even admit to, I've had a trigger in the last 4.5 years, then again, how am I ever going to believe the big things? It's why, like, oftentimes partners say, well, if he's lying about the small stuff, like in what universe would I ever trust any of the larger issues that actually have really big impact and consequences? So here's the thing. I think that there's a fine line around triggers. Okay. I think that we have to be careful, and we tell the guys this as well, and they're often told this in recovery as well, but sharing your triggers always with your partner is not the best route, because your trigger then becomes their trigger. Now, after this fact, if you're having, let's say, a weekly check-in, or if you're having a vulnerable conversation, you're saying, you know what, I did have some triggering moments this week, and here's what I did with those triggers, right? I reached out to my sponsor. I picked up the phone and I called my sobriety brother. Obviously, it's not believable that 4.5 years have gone by and no, I really haven't been triggered, never going back. I mean, even the best of us are human. We have experiences where we find something attractive, or something pops into our head, or a visual stimulus like leads us to thinking something. All of that is completely normal. But you do, in recovery, we say, reach out to someone, right? I always say, if it's in your mind, it's not the thing you want to go and talk to your partner about. Hey, I had this specific fantasy, because it's hurtful, it's harmful, it's too much information. That's really what recovery is there for them. Actions, they have to be honest with you, with your partner. So if we're talking about triggering, I think it's okay. Obviously, lying and making up stories, like, that's not going to fly. Again, that is, now you've broken that trust, where now I'm questioning the big things, like, because that's exactly what's happening in your writing. Is you're saying, now I'm wondering, is he actually even sober? He's claiming he is, but he's lying about being triggered. So I do think it's important for the two of you to get straight on, hey, these are the things that I would appreciate knowing. And I would caution you against asking about him telling you every time he's triggered, because again, now that trigger is being transferred to you. So every time, it's like the blue car triggers me. Well, now every time you see a blue car and he's in your presence, you automatically go to the place of, oh my gosh, he's triggered right now. And now you're both triggered. And so the goal would be for him to utilize recovery and in that manner. But when you have a conversation, just say, hey, I don't necessarily need to know all of the details. If you have a fantasy, if you're triggered, I do hope and expect that in those moments you are reaching out to people that can help you. You're talking to your therapist, you're reaching out to your recovery people. But it's okay for me to know that you struggle, that I'm not going to immediately go into, ripping through phone records because you told me you had a rough week. I want to be able to be there for you in the tough times, and also for you in the times where things are going really well. And, creating kind of a safety around sharing that is all I would say. because yeah, that you don't want the lying and the stories. And clearly there's a motive to covering up being triggered. Like and maybe that is because he's, well, if I tell her I'm triggered, she's going to be triggered. She's going to assume I'm doing more things and I'm not, which isn't honest and it's not right.
And so, okay, I got a bunch of little things because like we're both in recovery. What are you both doing for your recovery? Because I hear I'm really triggered because I feel like he's still gaslighting and lying to me. So that doesn't feel like recovery. Abstinence, maybe. And he's a porn addict. So like, maybe I've just been doing this too long, but I'm a little cynical. Like I'm always hopeful, but I'm a little cynical when someone says, "Oh, I've been, perfect, and I haven't done anything, in a porn addict kind of way." I'm going like, "Are you on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook? Are you watching,
You see a billboard.
titillating?"
I mean,
Exactly.
we're
Yeah,
human.
yeah. I
We're
know.
met
And
with a
so
minefield of visual triggers every day. I swear to God, Tammy, I was just trying to buy a chair for the office and I'm on Amazon. And I am not kidding you. It's like the advertisement, which was a video in the middle of the Amazon scroll, is like a 14-year-old scantily clad, like laying all over the chair. And I'm just like, this is the world we live in.
mhm,
Right. That was the advertisement. I'm just trying to buy a damn chair,
mhm.
So to say that you've never been triggered, that's just not happening. That's not true.
Right. And so I want to affirm you are being lied to, but you also talked about your safety. So I want to know, what are you doing for your safety? What are your healthy boundaries for your safety, your physical safety, emotional safety, financial safety, spiritual safety? What are those in place? And it isn't like you need to tell me when you're triggered. Just say, with the like the lying, the lying and minimizing, feels like gaslighting to me, and therefore I won't be able to be as close to you as I would like. You were 4.5 years into this journey, and we, ideally I would vision us being able to move closer together. So I'm looking for, these actions. These actions would show me that you're doing the work. And we get a daily reprieve. I say this all the time. We get a daily reprieve from our addictive behaviors based on what we are doing today. I visit a 12-step meeting up in Seattle, and I love it. It's called the Daily Reprieve. I found the meeting and went, that's my meeting. And I go to that meeting because, when I'm there, I'm not there. But when I'm there, because like I exactly get one day based on what I'm doing today. I don't get, oh, I quit doing that, so now I'm all good and I'm never going to be triggered, and my life is going to be gumdrops and lollipops. That's not true. So to me, this feels like his lack of action is a problem. I don't hear him taking responsibility. I still hear the blame shifting and gaslighting. So I'm going to invite you. What do you need to do to take care of you, that you have, safety for yourself, regardless of what he's doing or not doing? Obviously, your ability to be close to him is going to be negatively affected if he's not safe, and he's not safe if he's lying about, kind of everything. So, okay, Erin, the next one. How important is it for an SA to own what he's done? Married 36 years and been addicted to porn since before that. He escalated 3 times, which resulted in major D days. He seems to be in good recovery, but he likes to tell me about, this is a problem. But he likes to tell me about other SAs that have done worse things than him. But he's done some pretty bad stuff to me. So I don't want to hear about other people. He's on step 4, so maybe owning his stuff will come later. When he does this, it makes me think he's minimizing, and will this make him more likely to relapse? That's a great question.
Yeah, first of all, we are an anonymous program, right? So
Yes.
I don't like hearing, like, I come back and tell you about, Jim, George, Bob, and Holly. Like I don't, those stories are meant to stay in those meetings. So anyways, and yeah, any level of comparison is denial. I'm sorry, it just is. And we deal a lot with that. I would say more so in the first week of inpatient treatment, where we say, I'm looking at the differences, not the similarities, right? I'm looking around the room and I'm saying, well, I haven't done that, or I haven't done that. But the bottom line is, and I tell them all, forget the content. Forget the content. Look at the emotional impact what you've done has had on the people around you. I had a guy come in who had been sober for 9 years. 9 years, but he was coming in because he's like, I cannot get to a place where I can own what I've done and be emotionally healing to my partner. And that's what he was coming for. And he found that. But yeah, I think yes, step 4 is going to definitely help because he's doing a searching and fearless moral inventory, right, of all of the things. But it is minimizing, and that's disrespectful in a lot of ways, because it's saying, because really you're over here saying, whether you minimize your behavior or not, this is how it impacted me, and it hurt, and it knocked me down, and it set a bomb off in my life 3 separate times or more. And he's over there saying, yeah, but I didn't do what he didn't do. It's like being like, yeah, I assaulted the guy, but hey, I didn't murder him like that guy over there. I mean, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's about owning. Yeah. Ownership is so huge. And when I start to see some of them, like, you're in recovery. Okay. I can own it. And when I own it, it actually takes the shame away. I can own it because I can have guilt. Guilt can be a teacher, right? I did something because I am wounded or hurt, but in my core of me is, I am deserving of love. I can do this. I am worthy of recovery. I deserve good things in life. I made some terrible choices. I did some bad actions. Like, that's guilt. Shame is, I am a shitty person. My core belief is, I am not deserving of love. I am not deserving of good things. I don't deserve recovery, like all of that. So sometimes minimizing is when they're still in that shame spiral of trying to, like, not feel that I am as bad as I feel I am. And when I see someone that's really in recovery, in the recovery process, it's like they got the foundation under them that says, okay, I do deserve good things, and I can do this, but damn, I have the wreckage I've caused. And that's the stuff I have to own. And I can own it because it doesn't make me, it doesn't decimate me to sand on the ground. Right. So I think there's probably some of that going on. I'm hopeful in his step 4, and especially step 5, when he actually is sharing that with somebody else, that maybe some of the shame is released and he's able to own it. But yeah, somebody who's consistently minimizing absolutely does have a higher risk of relapse in my book, because they're they're simply not seeing the consequences of their actions and the impact it's had on someone else. And if nothing else, I would say he's not participating in the journey to help you heal, because you do need someone to empathically look at you and say, God, I acknowledge that I caused the situation we're in, and I validate the pain that you're in. And if he's telling you war stories about somebody else to compare and make himself feel better, then that's not a great sign. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like, this is like, well, I only drink beer. I didn't drink whiskey. So therefore, like, I'm not as bad of an alcoholic. It doesn't matter. Like, guess what? You're sitting in the same meeting. You're there for a reason. It doesn't matter. The stories are all different. Like, the details are different. I've been doing this a while, and I've never met somebody who is the exact same life story as me. And I can relate to every single person I sit into a meeting with, because I'm looking for the similarities. Just like Erin said, I'm looking for the similarities. And it's the pain that we've caused to ourselves and everyone else. And it's the hope for the future and learning how to live on life's terms. This would be problematic. And I would, invite him not to share those, like, yeah, like, doesn't matter. Keep going, and
Yeah.
we'll see. But again, back to healthy boundaries for you. So what do you need to do to take care of yourself? Because I would feel worse if somebody was telling me, well, I'm not as bad as that person, but you know what, there's somebody else sitting in the meeting and you were worse than that person. So comparison doesn't really help. If we're pointing a finger at one person, there's still all the fingers pointing back to you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if he wants recovery, then he's going to embrace this. He's going to do what he needs to do. We have a residential treatment program, for guys that get stuck. We have a residential treatment program that helps move them through. And we have a family specialist that does a
And
great job of supporting our partners.
they don't make it very far with minimizing and denial. I'll tell you that. That gets confronted pretty quickly. And we see it all the time on the front end. And I remember the early days of recovery. I mean, I was so ashamed, and honestly, it was like waking up from a nightmare. Like coming out of treatment and looking at my phone and seeing all the people that were mad and where I left everything off, and I like burned life to the ground. And so I do remember looking around and making some of those comparisons in the early game because I felt so terrible about myself. So it was when I actually began to take accountability, but also learn that you know what? I'm worthy of love. I'm broken. I had so much brokenness in me. And as I learned to heal, I learned that I'm a worthy individual. I was thought literally in the beginning of my days, like I would never amount to anything. And so I understand that, but it really relates more to shame than it does anything else. And it's not helpful. It's poisonous.
Yeah, I had a very much, if they knew how bad it was, and like now looking back, like, I was, I wasn't in a relationship. I hadn't like, I had trust me, I had enough. Believe me, I absolutely own that I'm an addict, but, like I didn't have years or decades of, ruining,
Mm.
everything's, and, and I knew for sure I was the worst person on the planet, and, so I had a huge amount of shame, but guess what? I learned by comparison, it wasn't the details, but by comparing with others and going like, yeah, me too. I felt, just as horrible about myself. And, guess what? You're a typical addict. And, here's a path that you can do and things will be better. But yes, somebody who does not own it, and continues to minimize, then yes, I would really make sure that your healthy boundaries for your safety are well in place, because they may have one more lesson to learn, so
Mm.
I hope not. I always am hoping people get it. So okay, so the next one is, what would you say to a partner who found out that their addict was faking recovery for years, but from now on it will be real? What do you say to the addict?
This is a really hard one because it takes a special kind of person to lie in their addiction, right? That kind of seems to be expected. But to lie throughout recovery is a different layer. And that's really hard because, okay, your behavior can look really different in recovery. And those action points are what are supposed to build trust. But if those action points were also a lie or built on a lie, then it's really, really hard to regain trust after that. So what I would say to the addict is it's time for double, triple duty here. It's time for whatever you did before, you're going to do it times five because, and how are you going to communicate and show what authentic recovery looks like? Because clearly forever, a period of time, whether you were lying about actually going to things or you were going and lying that you were sober, meaning I was still acting out all through that, that actually makes more sense, right? Because I'm still really under the influence of my drug of choice here. Um, yeah, that's a tough one because, and we get that in treatment a lot. And those partners are destroyed because they're like, I don't even have a barometer to look at anymore because the barometer I thought was recovery is not recovery. So I would just say you're going to have to double down and offer more. I don't want partners chasing down evidence, right? I mean, it's just like a waste of our time and our ability to be regulated. But what I would say is offer as much safety as you can. If that's like, I'm going to do a meeting card, I'm going to, ensure that I'm checking in with my sponsor every day for a while. I'm going to actually have evidence and actions that show I'm doing and showing up in ways that I wasn't before. Because even if you're in recovery, right? I imagine that if you were still acting out, there were still signs that something wasn't right. And your intuition goes off like, God, they're in recovery, but man, what is not, something's off here, right? They still are not looking me in the eyes and getting to that place of more emotional vulnerability. Or, they said they went to the meeting, but I never hear about, how it went, or I got stuck on the drive, or I mean, there's signs, right? So I would just say at this point, you have to offer a hell of a lot more um, to prove yourself because you lied in addiction and you lied in recovery. And that is a really tough one to come back from.
It's doable because trust me, just like Erin said, we get lies or guys that have come in, they have lied. You have taken multi-year chips, at meetings, and we're never actually, abstinent. So, and one of the toughest thing, it's hard to say it to a partner. It's really hard to go to a 12-step meeting and fess up. I was lying the entire time to you, but that's what it takes. My catch on this was, now he's saying, but from now on it will be real. And I'm like, massive red flags. Like, it's never, if lips are moving, I say this all the time, if lips are moving, don't trust it. It's action. And like Erin was saying, it's, quadrupling down on the actions and being accountable. What is the accountability plan? Debbie McCrae did a really good webinar, I think in the last 6 months, about, the 12, things for accountability. And that would be probably useful for both of you to have, that information of, here are signs of accountability. And that would be helpful for your addict partner to have, like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for you to show up and be accountable, across these things, so that you can see, that there is real accountability. So I'm going to sound like a broken record. Healthy boundaries for you, for your safety. Don't trust the words, pay attention to the actions. This, nothing you did or didn't do caused this, but yeah, shame and the false facade. I mean, it's like the one place we should be most truthful in is our 12-step meetings. And, and we lie, and until we don't, we can learn. So there is hope, but, don't trust, any words, trust the actions that you are seeing, happen. So, okay. How do you know that they reached out to their sponsor?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things around recovery, right? Where you're like, but then how do I know? Right. And there's also some boundaries around recovery, right? So I would say that recovery is the one place that the addict should have some level of privacy, meaning that I'm not saying that you shouldn't maybe even have, a weekly check where you're saying, I just want to know, I just want to see that you've called your sponsor, right? I personally choose not to be in that place, but I honor that that's an option. But I do think there's a boundary around, we hear like partners saying, I'm going to call your sponsor every day and verify that you called him. And like, we don't want to do that, right? Because that relationship really is sacred between them. And to some point, trust becomes something that you don't always have verification of everything. I always say that it should make sense. When you see the bigger picture, all the things should add up, right? It's not, because when your intuition's going off, trust your gut because your gut's almost always right. And even after you've been betrayed, and I know that sometimes our biggest gaslighting betrayal is of ourself, because we gaslit ourselves long before we were ever able and willing to ask the question, what the hell is going on? Something is not right. We told ourselves, like, is it me? What's going on with me? And it's not you, right? So I would just say you could have a system with your addict about what you feel comfortable with. And I would say this isn't forever, but if for a period of time, hey, when we do our weekly check-ins, because you lied about recovery, it would be really meaningful for me that you could just show me that you called your sponsor every day this week. I mean, so that would be a discussion between the two of you. I wouldn't go so far as to be like, I want to speak to your sponsor. Or we've had partners that like sat outside of meetings, making sure that they're inside. And that's, to me, is just in some ways giving up your own sense of joy. It's giving up your own sense of, I have a life and I want to live it. My sole purpose is not to track you down. And sometimes that stuff is dysregulating too, especially when you're already dysregulated, because this is hell on earth going through this. So yeah, there's some ways that you guys could set up what makes sense. Even the sponsor sending him an email at the end of the week saying, hey, I just wanted to recap that you and I chatted these days this week, and he could show that to you, something of that nature that shows some accountability, but isn't really on the intrusive side of getting too involved and over involved in recovery.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to ask this is me, and Erin may disagree, but I think it's fair to ask what step he's on, like, I
Sure.
think it's fair to have the accountability of, what step are you working? And if they're constantly in 1, 2, and 3, that's avoiding 4 through 9 are the housekeeping. That's where we start to make change. That's where we,
Yeah.
start to do the work. Somebody shared that they were, in step 4. That's good.
Yeah.
Lots of people, kind of try to skip those steps because they're not as fun. And so I don't want to have to look at all the things that happen, but gosh, the freedom that we get from those things is really meaningful. So,
Yeah.
and I meant to share it earlier. It was one of those, I put it in the chat, but there's a Thanos check-in. It's just one check-in. There are others, fine. Debbie McCray has shared fine. And, whatever check-in works for you. I had, people that created their own. And as long as it works and you keep it to a couple minutes and it's checking in, it builds communication. And that can help bridge the gap on trust and safety. But at some point, it's, if you're externally focused, if, like Erin said, if your joy or your emotional stability is based on what your addict is doing or not doing, like, that's always external. If you are taking care of yourself regardless of what your addict is doing or not doing, you can be okay. It's a lot nicer if the addict is doing the recovery work and working on being, a person of integrity, and and living in recovery. But you don't have to, you know, be, I always say it's like the ping pong ball where you're bouncing around, where whatever happens, you can be okay,
Yeah.
and have joy.
And I think too, I always say it's best for the addict to offer, meaning that might be the part of the boundary is, hey, I recommend something that we do, we give to our guys called the relationship board meeting, but it's once a week. And you do check in on recovery. But at that time, what you're saying is, hey, I don't want to be your mom. Like, I don't want to follow after you. I don't want to ask you. I don't want to confirm these things. I want you to offer that information because it makes me feel safe. So when we do our check in on Sunday nights and we talk about recovery, I'd love for you to share with me confirmation that you've spoken to your sponsor for 90 days. I would love for you to share what step you're on. Like, what are you doing? And it doesn't have to be, let me share with the intricate details of all of the, we don't want that. But I do think, like, so for me, I'm like, I don't want to chase after you. You're the one who hurt here. So I would love for you to help me heal by providing this information that's in your integrity. And this is what I would like to see when we meet up on Sunday nights. I think it's just one way to set a boundary, but also I'm not chasing it down because that doesn't feel good, right? It's like that private investigator role that just, you want to be someone's partner, right? You want to build equality and you want to be a partner, and they're not going to be able to do that unless they take some ownership and accountability and actually be a rock for you for a change, right? I'm not going to be the child anymore. I'm going to step up, I'm going to rise up, and I'm going to allow for, I'm going to offer this stuff because I owe that to you, right? That feels so much better than what did you do today? It's like nobody wants to do that, and I know you don't either. So I just think that could be part of the boundary setting, is saying, hey, when we sit down, these are the things I'd like to go over. And I would really love it if you could offer that information. I don't want to chase it down.
And so, me in books. So, Life Anonymous, Kristen Snowden, who will be the webinar host on Wednesday, and our teammate, Scott Brassert, co-authored Life Anonymous. And for partners, I think it's really helpful. It's just good living. Kristen wrote it from a non-addict standpoint, but the 12 steps are just good living. And it would also give you language, because it sounds kind of like a foreign language sometimes, when you start talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
I've been married to my husband long enough. He'll go, I think he's in the program, because somebody will use a phrasing or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, we say things differently, but just having, kind of going through this and having some language and having some understanding of what it is. There's a 4th step in here too for, people. And it's not about, the problematic behaviors. It's just looking at, It's kind of like living the examined life. We have an opportunity to do it. So if it's of interest, Life Anonymous, and it's posted on our website too. We've got a whole bunch of books, and Kristen will be here on Wednesday. You can come ask her questions.
Fabulous.
Yes. Okay, so next question. My husband seemed to create stories, lies, delusions while he was acting out, porn, dating sites, etc. Is this normal? I
Mhm.
saw what he had been saying to random women online, and a lot of it was untrue. Not just boasting, but delusional things that my husband truly believed, but now sees that they were not true. 10 months since D-Day.
Yeah, we see this a lot, especially in kind of the crossover between sex and love addiction, when it's like almost like romanticizing limerence, right? The obsession of feeling something, getting validation, full blown. I'm talking like, whoa, where did that come from? We're talking about whole stories, and it's all like to create a victim mentality, to get and engender support and validation and care. Oftentimes that's what we see. And yeah, it's all part of the fantasy. It's all part of creating the feeling. You create this scenario to get the exact feeling that's part of your arousal template, right? And yeah, it's not uncommon. It's incredibly painful, especially if those stories are found, because there's oftentimes terrible things said about you or the family or their job, or I mean things that are just completely like out in outer space. They don't make sense. But if you take away the content of the story and you look at what's the feeling he was trying to engender from somebody, that's part of the arousal template. That's the part of them that's like, this is what I was seeking. I was seeking this specific feeling from this person, and this is what I needed to do to create that. And it's almost like virtual reality. It's like I go in and I create my reality to get that exact dopamine hit that I'm looking for. And unfortunately, yeah, we do see it quite often.
Yeah, I'm like, yes, every addict, even if it's not the fantasies, is it's lies and delusions, that I'm not hurting anybody else. And, as long as nobody finds out, it's all fine. Lots of that. So, okay, my husband and I live as wonderful roommates. I believe he's 2 years abstinent, although physical intimacy and emotional intimacy is sparse to non-existent. I do not want to be in an open marriage. I don't want to have an affair in life. We get along really well, money, kids, grandkids, housework, etc. How do I deal with my own romantic fantasies of leaving to pursue love and romance? He does not mention sex to me, and I don't want to continue pursuing him or wasting my time and heart waiting for him to change.
Yeah. So this is sometimes what we see, like I said, on the opposite pendulum swing, which is I've now gone from sexually acting out to being like totally afraid of sexual impulse at all. And I just completely put it at bay. Or I've never really learned to mix love and intimacy. So this hot button acting out, dopamine hit, intensity junkie stuff that I was doing is there, but now with this, like, I don't know how to do this. I've never known how to do this. So I think you have to ask yourself, what is enough, in a marriage, right? You didn't sign up to be roommates. You signed up to spend the rest of your life with someone that you could share in sex, love, intimacy, grandkids, money, family, all of these things. And you have to ask yourself, is something missing here? Like, what is it that's the barrier? What's the block? What does he say when I do pursue, or I say I do want to have you gone to couples therapy at this point would be a really good time to do that, because we're 2 years in, to explore kind of what's not jiving here. Why are we at this barrier when you're, abstinent? Not sure if that means recovery, but I do think for you, I mean, I can only speak for myself. Like, I don't know if I'd want to be in a relationship for the rest of my life that was roommates, right? I can get a roommate. We can be separate and co-parent and see the grandkids and all be very happy, but not be together. Because of course, I think it's part of human nature that you want sex, love, and connection. Like those are part of our human experience. Some people would be very happy as roommates and they're like, I don't need that. I'm fine. We'll roommate it up forever. But what I'm hearing is I long for that. And I long for having, you know, somebody that actually desires me and wants me and cares about me in a way that I feel attractive. I feel like there's a spark here, right? And we've been together a long time, but at the same time, this kind of all went on halt. So I would recommend pursuing some professional help first to see if you can get under what's the barrier. Like, why after 2 years we have not been able to get back? Maybe there's some fear in there. Maybe it was I have porn induced erectile. I'm just throwing out, things at the wall here, but porn induced erectile dysfunction, and I have terror around performance. Like I'm afraid of going there again. And maybe there's some ways to get really vulnerable and talk about what is it? Like what's happening here so that we can just decide what we want to do. Because obviously I don't want you to be in a position where you deny that part of yourself over and over and over again. And then you do end up acting on some kind of a fantasy. And then it's like, okay, now we're both gone out the back door. We don't want that either. And so I think you have to get really honest with yourself about what do I need? And how do I communicate what I need? And what are some pathways to help us get there? Or if the answer is we're not going to get there, he's not willing, or this ends, then you have to ask yourself, am I okay? Like, am I okay with this as is, or do I need to consider what moving on looks like? And there's no shame either way. Realistically, there's no shame either way. I know it's easier said than done, but that's where the honesty comes in with self.
And I was reading physical and emotional, and I'm going like physical, probably physical, sexual, and emotional, and I'm going to define physical intimacy. I mean, that could be holding hands, and we need physical touch, so if you're getting it from the grandkids or, your pet or whatever, that helps, but still,
it ain't the same, Tammy.
It
not
isn't.
the
No, I was
same.
gonna say I was gonna say, but we still long for,
Totally.
the connection with our significant other person. And so, but, physical and emotional, to me, like, kind of a double whammy, like we can be emotionally connected, even, even if we're, not physically or sexually, as connected. So it feels like there's like, yeah, your roommates, and you're doing the housework great, and you're doing, well, that, like, you can have a housekeeper, no offense, do, some of those things. So, so I think that's really one of those, journaling about what are your real needs. I love that Erin said, talk to a professional. I give out referrals to, sex therapists, so a couples therapist, but even, sex therapists, if you're willing to go there, but maybe that's too much. Maybe start, getting the emotional, and, Erin talked about sensate focus touch, and that can be, massaging feet, I mean, there's so many different things. But
Absolutely.
to me, I hear an addict who's going like, well, this is working. We're getting along really well, and not wanting to rock the boat. And you're sitting there going, I'm dying here. I'm dying I'm not connecting,
Right.
so there's just a big kind of gap there.
Disconnect.
Okay. My husband just started seeing a therapist, non-CSAT, that he used to see prior to discovery. He refuses to see a CSAT due to the variety of reasons, and says he feels more comfortable with this therapist. I'm not comfortable with this at all, especially since I know that a full therapeutic disclosure to move on, and I will only do it with someone who is qualified. Any other issues I should be concerned about when a sex addict uses a non-CSAT for therapy, or can this sometimes be successful?
Yeah, I mean, no. I mean, yes, there are some therapists out there that actually do get this work and they're good, but they're like, there's a reason why we get the certification and we're qualified to do this, because we've seen a number of therapists that are not CSAT send people in all kinds of directions that we would not send somebody, right? And I think that's just because, look, before I got into this field as a therapist, I think I had one class on like human sexuality. We are not trained at all to assess for this, to give guidance with this, to a full therapeutic disclosure is incredibly complex. There is so many layers and pieces to that. So yeah, I'm just saying, as a therapist, we are not trained to tackle this. I mean, this was not even talked about, not a whisper of this word said in all of grad school in my training. And I worked in recovery for a long, like, it's not, so there's a reason why CSATs are here. And that's because they actually went through and did a hell of a lot more training to understand this whole concept and how to treat it. So he doesn't get to say, I just feel really comfortable here. No wonder you want to stay. You're not, yeah, of course. No, therapy is, to me, if you're super comfortable, you're not growing. Like, you really need to be pushed and challenged a bit. If you love your therapist so much, they could be your friend on a Sunday barbecue, like, you're at the wrong spot, because you do want someone that can gently and lovingly hold you accountable and push you forward in growth. And so I just feel really comfortable with this therapist. Okay, that's really great. I'm not looking for comfortable. I'm looking for growth. I'm looking for challenge. I'm looking for us to move forward. And guess what? This is my boundary. I actually need this to heal. I actually need this to move forward. And I'm not going to accept that that's not an option. Also, I want full therapeutic disclosure, and that needs to be done by a qualified professional. Promise me you will not go to someone who is not trained to try and do some kind of disclosure. They are traumatic and hellish if you are not with qualified people that actually set it up correctly. We've heard all of the stories. I mean, it can be bad. So I would say there are other therapists that can do therapeutic disclosures, other CSATs, like if couples, we have some that are couples that do like intensives or workshops, or they're willing to do both pieces in collaboration with your other therapist. There's options, but please have a CSAT involved. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but you don't get to say that. You don't get to say, hey, I just really like chatting with my therapist. I feel real comfortable here, so I'm not moving on. Guess what? You are the one that put us here. And I'm telling you, this is what I need to heal. So you're either in the trenches with me, like digging up this stuff and moving forward, or you're not. And so that's a cop out. And we hear that too. And I'm just like, silly guy, come on. Come on.
Well, anytime I hear, my addict is really comfortable with their therapist, massive red flags. I always do the same thing. You should respect your therapist. Like, I absolutely believe in respect. I respect my therapist and believe that that person can help me. But, if I'm sitting there going like, yeah, that everything's great. If they're just doing talk therapy, this takes, addiction recovery, behavior. Dr. Rob says this all the time: behavioral issues take behavioral change. And so it's a very different kind of therapy. Most therapists are not qualified and trained in this, and no bad on them. If you've got other issues, go see all of them. They're fantastic. And this is special work. CSAT has 150 hours plus of training on top of their master's level professional licensing and everything in order to be able to do this work. And even with that, guess what? We don't recommend all of them. They're like, people email me all the time because I'm like, there are some of them that I would go see myself. And then there's others that I wouldn't send anybody to, like I've got a list of horror stories that I hear. And so like, I keep that to myself, but make sure that I'm paying attention to that, because I want you guys to have the right help. But this is absolutely, your behavior causes, you don't get to pick. And if he's only seeing his non-qualified therapist and he's not doing 12-step, he's not doing our drop-in groups, he isn't doing our online work group. Sex Addiction 101 started last Saturday, and I've already added guys to it. Guess what? Like, that is called dragging my feet and trying to control the situation, because I don't really want to change. Kind of like the first question where it's like, well, other people have it worse than me. So, I'm not that bad. So healthy boundaries for you. Take care of you.
Yeah.
Okay. 3 weeks since D-Day, SA is attending 12-step group at least once a day for the next 90 days. That's awesome. Has a sponsor, blockers on devices, searching for a CSAT. I'm in support groups, watching the webinars, reading books, listening to podcasts, and also trying to find a therapist that works with the trade partners. I'm trying not to overstep in what he should be doing, but I feel like he should be doing more in this. Or is this an unreasonable expectation?
Well, it sounds like he's doing a good job.
Yep.
I don't foresee at this point there's much more he could be doing. If he's going to meetings every day as a sponsor, he's got filtering software on his devices, he's looking for a therapist. If you had something in mind and a specific reason for that, in other words, like, hey, I really recognize that this is something that you or I or we struggle with, and this is something that might help with that, and it would really help me to see you engage in that, that would be one thing. But I do think from what you're written down, and you're in the thick of it, okay? I'll just say you're 3 weeks out. Right now, it's not going to feel like anything is enough because it's painful. And your whole world's turned upside down, and it's like you need to spend 24/7 fixing this, right? Because this is horrible. But I would just say give it some time. Let him engage in this like 90 and 90. Start with the CSAT. CSAT may make additional recommendations too, like for a support group for men or something else. We have our groups as well, our free groups, our our low cost work groups. Like there are additional things he can do. But I will say just at face value, it's a great start. It's a great start. And I think I'm so grateful that you're invested in your healing because you're going to need it. I would also say sometimes because we are so tunnel vision after a traumatic experience like that, we inundate ourselves with everything I read is betrayal trauma. Everything I'm surrounded by is betrayal trauma. I said, just balance a little bit with what are other things in my life that do help, because I think all of those things are amazing. You just don't want, what happens sometimes is when I'm literally spending all my time in that vortex. Sometimes it actually can escalate a little bit because you're not actually spending any time out of it, like some respite from all of the chaos, right? Like what are some other things in my life I do that make me feel alive and make me remember that I have a life outside of this chaos, right? So that would be my suggestion. So I would just say, give it some time. Let the 90 and 90 play out. Let's see what the CSAT says. But it's a good start.
Self-care for you, just like Erin said. And I put in the chat on our website, we've got the online work groups, including a betrayed partner one. And that's, healthy boundaries and good communication. How do you take care of yourself? So that it can be, but yeah, yes, understanding, learning about what sex addiction is and isn't, because there's lots of false information about what it is and isn't. So we try to make sure we've got enough resources. Yeah, but this is not the 24/7 job that you need to deal with. Is like learning everything, I am impressed to the level of like, yeah, I'm taking this seriously versus, like, oh, well, I kind of want to do what I want to do. So this shows a willingness. And so that feels, really hopeful for both of you, but you're in the thick of it. So yeah, take care of you.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible or normal for my SA husband to bring up memories and information that he says he has forgotten and I need answers to, but by using EMDR with his trauma therapist, I don't know how we will have a proper informative disclosure if he can't remember what seems like anything sometimes, especially his behaviors and related activities towards the beginning to the middle of our almost 20-year relationship. So formal therapeutic disclosure is not all the gory details over 20 years, so cumulative, but hopefully he's working with his CSAT therapist to work on a timeline. Well, Erin, like you talk, I know we have guys in our treatment program and they're working on timelines and all that, and they have a whole lot more information to be prepared for formal therapeutic disclosure. But, if you're looking for every gory detail, there's a plan after disclosure for if something comes to mind, there's a plan for how we're going to navigate that. It's talked about by your qualified professional. So,
yeah, I think though, it is not uncommon and incredibly frustrating that a lot of guys do not remember a lot of especially when we're talking about 20, 30 years of acting out, right? And to us, right? So to a betrayed partner, it's like, I want to know if you were present on our wedding day. I want to know if you were around. Like we remember these moments and we want to know, what is it clouded by this thing, or where were you on that trip? Like it's like part of our putting the pieces together to have like consent about what I'm doing next. So I understand this. Good therapeutic disclosure, they use like, oftentimes they'll go through their old calendars, they'll go through their old emails, they'll go through, old flights, right? Like and this is why like having a CSAT on is, I call it like an investigator on the case, right? Like the CSAT that's helping your husband prepare for therapeutic disclosure can say, what corroborating materials do we need to put together like a general time so that you do have cumulative information to give. But it's not uncommon, especially because the brain is hijacked. The brain is hijacked in this process. And a lot of men also have, it's part of a ritual and it just became routine at times that they're not going to remember specifics, right? And so in what they're reporting is a cumulative record, right? They're not going through, in 1984 on this date, I did this thing, right? They should be able to answer some of the questions you have. But again, it's really about cumulative patterns. And of course, I understand I want to know the answers to these specific questions. And if they don't have an answer to it, you're like, well, then you're just lying and you're hiding that information from me. And that's not always the case. That can be the case. But I would just say a good CSAT will be able to say this therapeutic disclosure is complete, right? This feels like you really did a searching and fearless inventory of the past, and you have really come with a really full disclosure. Then talking about EMDR kind of as a separate thing, sure, EMDR can bring up all kinds of repressed stuff. Would I use EMDR specifically to like go after remembering old acting out behaviors? I wouldn't, but it could be a byproduct of if he's doing EMDR with his trauma therapist and old memories come up. But typically that's repressed stuff more from childhood, I find, because I'm trained in EMDR, and that's typically what I find comes up is all of a sudden what was just a sensation in your body has now turned into, oh my God, there's an image attached to it, right? Like I now can remember that. So anyways, I would just say, be clear about what questions you have, and the CSAT should be able to say whether or not this is, appropriate or too much detail, or, and be able to provide what I think is a good and whole record that answers the questions. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate how prodependence has paved the way for betrayed partners to get more help, but I feel like even prodependence has so far to go in truly honoring the pain and outright abusive behaviors we all experience. What can we do to bring more awareness? I feel like bringing this up in social settings, even private ones with close friends, just drives people away. They're uncomfortable and they don't understand or want to hear about it. I'm just destroyed.
Yeah. First of all, I'm sending you a virtual hug. This is hard. And, I'll share, I am a betrayed partner. I've been through this, and it is hard because oftentimes when you're sharing it with somebody that doesn't quite understand all of this, right? Which is why you want to find supportive people that do understand this, right? Whether that's in our free groups or wherever it is, we are paving the way for creating awareness, right? And we have to ride that line of like, yeah, the behavior was abhorrent and it destroyed a family and it destroyed a life. And we believe recovery is possible, right? So there's those two things. Yeah, I think that ultimately right now what's really out there kind of all over the place is when you talk to someone about it, right? There's even like Chump Nation is a big, group of big trade partners where it's like, we don't support you if you're staying, right? We have an opinion about what you need to do. And we try to take the stance of we support whatever you choose to do. We want to give you the tools, whether you're staying or whether you're going, to be able to heal. But what I'll tell you is, yeah, we're in a society that doesn't yet understand this fully. We're on the front lines of trying to get that awareness out there and trying to get people help when they need help, and helping the wreckage that's been left behind heal. Because it just completely 100%, it wipes away everything you thought you knew. And it's incredibly painful. And so I do honor that right now it feels like nothing is enough to support this. And it might not feel that way for a while. I would say that you get the support of the people that do understand. And that's other betrayed partners, right? That's therapists that understand betrayal trauma. Because even on the addict side, they're never going to understand what it feels like to be you, right? They may say, like, I understand how I made you feel. And I'm like, guys, don't ever use that word. Like, don't use it, because you don't understand. You really don't. So I'm just sending you a big hug. It is a journey. It is a path. I have found that for myself, Yes, it's healthy boundaries. Yes, it's self-care. But for me, above all else, I had to make the decision that I don't want to be held hostage to the decisions that somebody else made in my life. And what that means is I have to hold myself in the pain. I have to get support for me. I want to wake up with joy, even when on days that are hard. I want to wake up with joy. I want to show up as a good mom. I want to show up as a good employee. I don't want to hate the guys that I work with in treatment, right? I want to be able to show up in the world as someone that I'm proud of. And in order for me to do that, I got to do a lot of work on me to support me, to regulate myself. Because whether he chooses to get better or not is like not in my control, as shitty as that is, right? It's not. So I am sending you lots of love, a big hug, and I'm so sorry for what you're going through. But we are on the front lines of trying to bring awareness to this whole dynamic.
You've got to go.
I
You
do.
are. Yeah, bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.
Sorry. Have a great night.